Hey guys, Brian here. Today we're diving into the top 10 cults from the last century. We're not just rehashing the past, we're finding out what happened to these groups. Are they still around? Did they change their names? Let's dive in. First up, the People's Temple and Jim Jones, a name that has become synonymous with tragedy and manipulation. It all started in the 1950s with Jones preaching social justice and equality, drawing in followers with his charismatic speeches and promises of a utopian society. But things got weird fast. What began as a movement for change quickly turned into something far more sinister. Jones demanded total obedience and isolated his followers from the outside world, creating an environment where he had absolute control. He moved everyone to Jonestown in Guyana, calling it paradise. But this so-called paradise was anything but. It was more like a prison, with Jones spiraling into paranoia and delusion, making life unbearable for his followers. In 1978, Jones ordered a mass suicide with cyanide-laced flavor aid, a horrific act that shocked the world. Over 900 people died, including hundreds of children, in one of the largest mass suicides in history. It was a huge tragedy, showing how dangerous cults can be when one person holds too much power and influence. Some survivors still defend Jones, calling him a misunderstood prophet, despite the overwhelming evidence of his manipulation and control. It's mind-blowing how belief can manipulate people, leading them to commit unthinkable acts in the name of faith. The People's Temple is a stark reminder of the dangers of blind faith and the importance of questioning authority. Even today, the story of Jonestown sends chills down our spines, a haunting example of what can happen when critical thinking is abandoned. It's a lesson in the power of control and the importance of critical thinking, reminding us to always question and never blindly follow. Let's move on to the next cult and see what other lessons we can learn from history. Next, we delve into the story of Heaven's Gate, a cult led by the enigmatic Marshall Applewhite, who was also known by his followers as Do. They held a firm belief that Earth was on the brink of being recycled, and their only salvation lay in a spaceship that they believed was trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. This comet, visible in the night sky, became a symbol of their impending journey to a higher plane of existence. To prepare for this celestial voyage, the members of Heaven's Gate adopted strict ascetic lifestyles. They shaved their heads, wore matching uniforms, and adhered to a rigid code of conduct, all in the hope of being deemed worthy of their otherworldly salvation. Tragically, in 1997, 39 members of the cult took their own lives in a mass suicide, convinced that this act would allow them to ascend to a higher existence beyond the physical realm. They were discovered lying in bunk beds, dressed in identical outfits, having consumed applesauce laced with phenobarbital. This chilling scene was a stark testament to the power of their beliefs. Contrary to the stereotype of cult members being uneducated or easily led, many of Heaven's Gate members were intelligent individuals, including skilled computer programmers. They even maintained their own website, which was quite advanced for the time, showcasing their technical prowess and their desire to spread their message to a wider audience. This story underscores the incredible power of belief and how it can lead people to follow a charismatic leader, sometimes to devastating ends. It's a chilling reminder of the lengths to which people will go for their deeply held convictions, often with tragic consequences. Heaven's Gate serves as a stark testament to the dangers of extreme ideologies and the potential for manipulation within tightly knit groups. With that sobering thought, let's move on to the next story. The next cult we'll explore is just as shocking, if not more so. Now, the Branch Davidians led by David Koresh. Koresh claimed to be a prophet preparing for an apocalyptic showdown. They lived on a compound in Waco, Texas, stockpiling weapons. In 1993, the ATF and FBI raided the compound, suspecting illegal weapons. A 51-day standoff ensued, ending in a tragic fire that killed Koresh and 75 followers. The Waco siege remains controversial, with debates over government actions and cult dangers. It's a reminder of the dangers of religious extremism and the importance of religious freedom. The Waco tragedy is a stark lesson in the consequences of fanaticism. Let's move on to the next cult. Naum Shinrikyo, a Japanese cult led by Shoko Asahara. Asahara claimed to be a reincarnated god preaching apocalyptic prophecies. He trained followers in chemical and biological warfare. In 1995, they released sarin gas in the Tokyo subway, killing 13 and injuring thousands. Asahara and his top lieutenants were arrested and sentenced to death. Despite being outlawed, splinter groups still exist, recruiting online. Aum Shinrikyo is a chilling reminder of the threat of extremism. The Tokyo attack shocked the world and exposed the dangers of cults. It's a lesson in the power of manipulation and the importance of vigilance. Let's move on to the next story. The next cult is equally disturbing. The Manson family, led by the infamous Charles Manson, is one of the most notorious cults in American history. Manson gathered a devoted group of followers in the late 1960s, primarily composed of young, impressionable women who were searching for meaning and belonging. He preached about an impending apocalyptic race war he called Helter Skelter, a term he borrowed from a Beatles song. Manson twisted the lyrics to fit his own delusional narrative. In the summer of 1969, Manson ordered his followers to carry out a series of brutal murders, including the horrific killing of actress Sharon Tate and her friends. These murders were intended to incite the race war Manson had prophesied. The gruesome murders shocked the world and shattered the idealistic image of the hippie counterculture, revealing a much darker and sinister side. Manson and his followers were quickly apprehended, and after a highly publicized trial, they were sentenced to life in prison for their heinous crimes. Charles Manson died in prison in 2017. But the legacy of his manipulation, violence, and the fear he instilled continues to haunt society. The Manson family serves as a chilling reminder of the evil that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly peaceful movements and communities. It's a stark lesson in the dangers posed by charismatic leaders who exploit blind loyalty and manipulate vulnerable individuals for their own twisted purposes. Now let's move on to the next cult, which has its own disturbing and chilling story to tell. The next story is just as chilling, if not more so, and will leave you questioning the nature of belief and power. The Children of God, later the Family International, founded by David Berg. Berg preached free love and spiritual liberation, but it was a front for abuse. He encouraged sexual activity, including with children. The group used flirty fishing to recruit members and isolated them from the outside world. They faced numerous accusations of child abuse and human trafficking. Berg died in 1994, but the group still exists, claiming to disavow his extreme teachings. Former members have horrific stories of abuse. The Children of God is a chilling example of exploitation under the guise of religion. Let's move on to the next cult. The Order of the Solar Temple, founded by Luc Jouret. Jouret claimed to be a descendant of the Knights Templar, preaching spiritual enlightenment. He demanded absolute obedience and convinced followers they needed purification through fire. In the early 1990s, the order was responsible for arson attacks and murders in Switzerland and Canada. They believed death by fire was a ritual sacrifice to another dimension. In 1994, 48 members died in mass suicides, found in ritualistic positions. The Order's reign of terror shocked the world. It's a reminder of the dangers of apocalyptic beliefs. Even in modern times, ancient superstitions can have deadly consequences. Let's move on to the next cult. The Rajneesh movement, led by Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh, aka Osho. Osho preached free love, meditation, and spiritual enlightenment, but also wealth and luxury. His followers flocked to his ashram in India and later to a ranch in Oregon. Things turned dark when Osho's inner circle, led by Ma Anand Sheela, engaged in criminal activities. They attempted murder, immigration fraud, and a bioterror attack on a local town. The movement collapsed under its scandals and Osho was deported. He died in 1990, but the movement is a cautionary tale about unchecked power. It's a lesson in the importance of critical thinking within spiritual communities. Let's move on to the next cult. The next story is equally wild. The movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God, a Ugandan cult, led by Credonia Murarindi and ex-Catholic priests, they preach strict adherence to the Ten Commandments. They convinced followers the world would end in 2000. As the year approached and the world didn't end, the leaders got desperate. They ordered followers to sell possessions and prepare for the apocalypse. In March 2000, a fire broke out in their compound, killing over 700 people. It's unclear if it was an accident or mass suicide. The tragedy is a reminder of the dangers of apocalyptic cults. It's a lesson in the importance of critical thinking. Let's move on to the final cult. The Church of the Lamb of God, a fundamentalist Mormon sect. Founded by Ervil LeBaron, who claimed to be a prophet, LeBaron ordered murders and taught that certain sins required blood atonement. The group operated in secrecy, involved in murders and bombings in the 70s and 80s. LeBaron died in prison in 1981, but his followers continued his violent legacy. The Church of the Lamb of God is still active today, keeping a low profile. It's a reminder that extremist groups can emerge within established religions. The dangers of fanaticism and violence are ever present. Let's wrap this up. That was intense, right? We just went through a century's worth of cult craziness. It's scary how easily people can be drawn into these groups. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives. See you next time.